Hello everybody, Noah here with Learn Meta-Analysis, and in this video we are going to be doing a quick introduction to PRISMA. So this is going to be a relatively surface level introduction because I really feel the best way to understand PRISMA is to actually read the paper and spend some time looking at the flowchart and looking at the checklist. But I want to introduce you to the main concepts of what PRISMA is, what it's for, and how you need to be aware of it as a systematic reviewer or meta-analyst. So by the end of this video, I'm hoping you'll be able to identify the importance of the PRISMA standards in systematic reviews. So the question you're probably asking, if you're not familiar with PRISMA already, is what is PRISMA? Well, it is essentially reporting standards for systematic reviews and meta-analyses to try and help ensure they are transparent and replicable. So the key elements of it, in my opinion, are the flowchart and the checklist, which can both accompany your paper when you go to actually submit it to a journal. So why should you care? This is one of the things that people have asked me before, like, okay, so PRISMA's out there, there's a whole bunch of these different reporting standards, like, why should I care about PRISMA specifically? Well, the reason is that reviewers expect you to use the PRISMA guidelines when you're conducting your review. At least in the field of education, PRISMA has become essentially the standard, and I know that in a number of other fields, PRISMA is the standard too. I see it a lot in medical papers when I read them. So currently in education, I see a lot of papers that reference using PRISMA. I see a lot of papers that are including the PRISMA flowchart, but I don't see too many papers yet actually including the PRISMA checklist itself. But we should still be using the checklist to make sure that we're including all of the elements. So long story short, why should you care? If you're looking to get your paper published, reviewers are expecting you to use these guidelines when you're conducting and reporting your review. So this is a link to the actual PRISMA statement itself. The website is pretty easy to remember. It is prisma-statement.org. It has a link to the different articles about PRISMA, and it also has a link to a couple websites that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes to help you complete the flowchart and also the checklist. Okay, so what does this mean to you as a systematic reviewer, as a meta-analyst, or as somebody who's simply reading systematic reviews or meta-analysis? Well, first, if you're actually conducting these methods, you basically need to track every methodological decision that you make throughout the process. Now, having done a number of systematic reviews and meta-analyses, I will make the note that even a decision that seems relatively trivial at the time should probably be written down somewhere. And so I like to keep what I call a scoping document, which is just basically a list of all of the methodological decisions that I've made throughout the meta-analysis process. And this way I don't have any questions about what I did in the future. Meta-analyses and systematic reviews take a lot of time, right? So let's say you made some decision, today, and then a month from now, you go back and you're looking at papers and you're trying to figure out why you excluded these 3 papers in particular when you don't necessarily, like maybe you didn't take perfect notes about why you did it, but hopefully if you have a scoping document or something like that where you're tracking all your methodological decisions, you might have decided, for example, if we were doing a study on virtual characters, you might have decided like an image of an actual human does not actually count as an image of a virtual character. So you need to write those things down. Like I definitely would not plan on just remembering it. I write down all of this type of information because it's so easy to forget, especially if you start juggling 10, 15 different projects at a time, and particularly if some of those are actually like other meta-analyses and systematic reviews. It's really easy to get them confused in your mind on accident. So I write down every single methodological decision, no matter how trivial it seems, because then if I can't remember something in the future, I just go back to this document, which ends up being a pretty long document in the end, and I can just search that document for whatever I'm looking for, and I can usually find an answer really fast without having to worry about trying to figure out why I did something, because I know I wrote it down. The second piece of this is if you're actually writing a manuscript for a systematic review or a meta-analysis, you need to make sure that you report everything from PRISMA in your manuscript. Now, fortunately, they have provided a wonderful checklist that helps you make sure that you do this, and I'm going to show that to you guys here in a few minutes. Okay, so how do you do this? Well, you could try and memorize each specific step, but at least for me, I have not been able to do that. I remember most of them, but I always actually have the checklist with me, and I go through that checklist and I write down where everything is in my manuscript. And that's one of the things that the website helps you do, is write down where in your manuscript all of these different items are. So if you want to provide that manuscript when you go to submit your article or your manuscript, the peer reviewers will be able to actually see it and be able to trace back where everything is located within your work. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the really key components of this whole thing around systematic review is that they should be replicable and transparent. And PRISMA is something that really helps us move towards this. So that's one of the main reasons that it's so important. And again, here is just the website, prisma-statement.org. Okay, so next I want to show you guys the two websites that I was referencing before, the one that helps you create the flowchart and the one that helps you create the checklist. Okay, so this is the first website, and this is very easily found on the PRISMA webpage. If you go to the PRISMA Statement webpage, really easily find links to their Shiny applications, which are just online applications that help you create the flowchart and the checklist. So this is the one for the flowchart, and if you click on Create Flow Diagram, you can see that they have sample diagrams here, and depending upon your answers, it will adjust. So for example, we can say, did we review previous studies? Currently, that's not included, but if we change that, then you can see that our chart dynamically changes, and we're able to put in all of the numbers and everything that we need to just using this interface here. And then when you're done, there's a variety of different ways that you can actually download this to a bunch of different formats. So if you don't want to have to recreate this from scratch, which it's accomplishable, you can do it, but it just takes some time. This website's really helpful because you're able to just plug in your numbers here. So we'll say 5 previous studies, previous reports, we'll say 50 just for fun. Databases, we'll say we searched 8. Register 0, websites, we'll say 3. And then total number of citations, we'll say, I don't know, 5,000 just for, or 50,000 just for conversation's sake. And you can see up here we have a previous version of review, there's 5. You can see we have under reports, we have 50. Over here it says databases, we have 8. Over here in citation searching, we have 50,000. So you can see how all of these things get automatically plugged into this nice little chart. So this is a wonderful tool if you have to create a PRISMA diagram. Okay, so how about the checklist? They similarly have created checklists to help with creating this as well. So you can go through the checklist here, and they have each step and the definition of each step for every single thing. And then you can just write down where in your manuscript it is. So you can say page 7, or maybe you want to be really specific and say page 7, line 88. Right? So you can see how these tools are really helpful for us. And again, you have the option to download this report as a bunch of different formats here. So both of these tools are really helpful. I know this was a super brief introduction to PRISMA, but honestly, I really believe this is one of those things where if you're actually conducting systematic reviews or meta-analyses, you really need to just read the paper and read the explanation document, and then these websites will be very helpful for you when you actually start reporting what it is that you found. And you actually are, when you're actually submitting your manuscript. So that said, that's really all I wanted to say as our introduction to PRISMA. Key takeaways: if you're a reader or of a systematic review, or you're trying to understand them better, look for some reference that they followed the PRISMA standards. And then what I would do, honestly, is I would just look at this checklist, and I would use this checklist as you're reviewing that manuscript to see, are all of these things included? And if you find things that aren't included, you're able to say and use that as like to contextualize the findings to this. So for example, if they didn't tell you enough about the methods, you might question why they didn't tell us about the methods. So what keywords were used? If we don't know that, then we don't really understand what's actually being searched. Similarly, if they didn't tell us what databases they used, then we don't really know if they captured everything, right? So there's a lot of different components to this PRISMA work, but none of it is overly complex and challenging to understand. A lot of it is written in plain normal language. The one kind of caveat I will say to that as I'm going through this, I'm remembering that there's some things about risk of bias. And so with risk of bias, this is a little bit, I don't want to say like specialized terminology, but it might not be terminology that you're familiar with. So they do explain all of these things they actually have a PRISMA paper that is about explaining the checklist and all of the different steps, and they provide examples. So they provide all of that for you. This is really just one of those things where you should just take the time to sit down and read the original PRISMA paper and read the PRISMA explanation of the checklist. So that said, I hope this has been at least a little bit helpful introduction to what PRISMA is on a conceptual level, and has provided you with a couple tools that'll help you when you're actually going to report your study. So that's all I want to say about PRISMA, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.